Hello, everybody. This is so great. Thank you all for joining. I love any opportunity to talk about this book and talk about activism. And I'm in a place at the moment where I need refreshing after I've been writing up a lecture series for like a job that turned around and said, well, we don't really need to talk about feminism. We don't really need to talk about decolonization. I'm really against this kind of burning books thing. And I was raging. So I'm in need to be refreshed. So thank you for joining. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about why I decided to create and edit this book, how I found the wonderful people who have contributed to it, and the two kind of like big words that are in the title, woke and also the missing generation. And then I'm going to hand over to Anna and Josh, who have come, who both have written a chapter. So Anna's is centered around food poverty and Josh is centered around being LGBTQ in the church. And they'll talk for maybe 2 or 3 minutes each about their chapters, if that's okay. So if I'll start, this is the book. It's beautiful and colourful, and it's also backwards, but never mind. The idea for the book was that I kind of felt like young people were being scapegoated in 2 ways. So our like political views that I think the majority of young people I know who are progressive kind of feel like their views are dismissed as like, oh, this is just a rhetoric of young woke people who don't really have the life experience. They're just enthusiastic. I heard one person kind of say like, oh, well, these young people, it makes them feel better by protesting. I was kind of in that place, like, where it was at the time where like Greta Thunberg was like 100 days protesting off school or something. And I was like, I don't think these people are doing this to make themselves feel better. Like, I think this is like a burning passion and something that we see needs to be fixed. And this dismissal of it is quite irritating, maybe for lack of a better word. And also this word woke is so rich and historically so important. And like for white people to be turning around and talking about how like the word woke in a negative sense, I just felt was quite an injustice to the legacy of what this means. That wokeness, kind of Angela Davis traces it back to like the double consciousness Black women needed to have in the American South, where they needed to be conscious that they were both a woman and they were Black, and kind of all those injustices around it. So she was kind of talking about how this is another consciousness in the world. And Alan Bosak talks about Black consciousness with anti-apartheid, and kind of again this idea of wokeness is coming out. And Anthony Ruddy talks about how he started talking about it in the 80s when nobody knew who he was. So I think that, yeah, like this idea of woke is like having to function in a world that's not designed for you and makes it very easy to scapegoat you. So I think what I wanted to do was not kind of say, I didn't want all the young people in the book to be like, we're all woke, like, well, we're like pioneers of social justice, look at us. But instead kind of be like, okay, you can use this label in a negative sense, or we're going to argue against that. I'm not saying that we're not woke, maybe we are, but we aspire to be woke. To be woke, to have that ability, to have that consciousness and be so aware of social justice and so aware of all the things that are like piling on you is something that we all should aspire to as Christians, as being outcasts and strangers in the world. And then the idea of a missing generation. If I can just, would I be able to share my screen now? If it's annoying, don't worry about it. Sorry, I should have asked at the beginning.
You should be able to.
Oh, there it is. Perfect. Here we go. You can all, I did the one that was, anyway, can you see it? Yeah. But it's not slideshow, never mind. Okay, so this cartoon was by Dave Walker, who's just a brilliant illustrator. And I think it just kind of sums up quite so well about like where young people are in the church, what they want, what they're calling for, this massive silo where it just seems like anything they say are not getting through, or there's no mechanisms to take it through, and then what the church is kind of still doing. And so I think this idea of like missing generation, I kind of wanted to be like, it's not young people that are missing from the church a lot of the time. Like maybe in like local congregations, you don't see as many young people, but the general decline, you don't see many people, full stop. And I just kind of think the attention that the church can put on young people actually like takes away the value of the ones that are already there. So I think so often young people go to church and they're like, oh, why don't you bring your friends? And why is it that you come to church and your generation doesn't? And so often I kind of like, I don't know, I can't speak for my generation, but I'm here and can I feel part of this fellowship, please? Rather than just a token for me to bring more young people to sit their bums on seats to then be blamed about us not being here. So it was that kind of idea of like, what does it actually mean for young people to be in the church, and how can we like integrate it, and what is it about church that young people are still interested in? So more about like maybe like listening and integrating. And I've had a lot of inspiration from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who talks a lot about like church community and how actually like it's not about having separate young people things, but how can we integrate young people into the whole body, the same as kind of anyone we want to integrate into the body of the church, and have that real intergenerational conversation about the future of the church, and not kind of blame it on one party or just focus numerically, I guess. Like, how can we think more about like discipleship? So the book has kind of tried to talk about that, and I found, and this was the easy but honestly, finding young people who are passionate who could talk about these chapters. So the kind of themes are like racial justice, climate change, LGBTQ, trans specifically as well, trauma, like sexual trauma, feminism, ableism, food poverty, mental health, homelessness, and interfaith and peacemaking. And there are some poems as well that are fantastic. So I can pass over to Anna first, because Anna's got to leave first to talk about her wonderful chapter and like the inspiration behind it, I guess.
Thanks, Victoria. Hello, I am at my office, so the internet's not great, so I hope you can all hear me and see me. The lighting's also very strange in my office. But anyway, so yeah, I wrote the chapter on food poverty, and I met Victoria last year. We were both doing an incredible course with St. Ethelburger's Centre for Reconciliation and Peace called Journey of Hope. And the purpose of the course was to just kind of learn more about reconciliation and hope, I guess, and become a better peacemaker in our local community. And we were the youngest people on the course by a country mile, and we were kind of always the ones shouting about justice and the importance of social justice and engagement and young people. And Victoria then messaged me one day and she's like, I've just seen on LinkedIn that you used to work for the World Food Programme. I'm writing a book and I need someone to write about poverty and food poverty. Can you do it? And I was like, yeah, I'm never going to say no to that. That sounds amazing. So I came at the book very much so from that angle that the World Food Programme is currently in, which is that it's all well and good to provide food in the short term when people are in crisis. But ultimately, no one should ever get to that point of crisis. And the World Food Programme is trying to move towards that model of not only providing food in the short term, but creating long-term systemic change. And so then I was looking at it from that angle, but through my Methodist roots. And I write about that a lot in the book. John Wesley was a big believer that no one should be poor. He gave away a lot of his wealth to the poor. He, developed some of the first charities focused on the things that he focused on in the 1700s. And as a Methodist, I think it's really part of my understanding of what it means to be Christian, that we should be working to improve the lives of the poor. And I think this country does a terrible job of that. And I think the church should be doing a heck of a lot more to change that. And that's basically what my chapter argues, is that we're not doing enough and we cannot do enough. And any of us who have enough, it should be an embarrassment to us that there are people that don't have enough. And that is the gospel, and that Jesus very clearly states that we should be sharing everything we have and giving everything we have, and that no one should go without. So yeah, that's my argument. So I guess I'm going to now pass on to Josh to speak about his chapter.
Yes, so I met Victoria through Student Christian Movement, which is kind of a network of liberal-minded students in UK universities. We're a very old organisation, but we've kind of become the alternative to the Christian Union in a sense, and we're very big on pushing values of inclusivity and open-mindedness. And Yes, that's how I met Victoria, and she asked me to write about queer issues in the church. And when I thought about this is it's a very big topic, and I think what I wanted to focus on was how frustrated I am with the current sort of methods and direction of conversations around queer liberation in the church. I think I was writing almost without naming the Church of England, but the current Church of England approach to discerning what to do about same-sex marriage kind of led me to the conclusion that the current approach of encouraging dialogue between two diametrically opposing sides does not work, and actually perpetuates further oppression, because dialogue with someone who's oppressing you, whilst they are still oppressing you and they haven't been neutralized from that power, cannot bring you liberation and justice, and that dialogue is often not actual dialogue, but instead a facade to make people feel heard and seen, but actually the ideas are taken and just ignored. And so I touch on ideas of Audre Lorde, who talks about how oppressed groups are made to educate their oppressors, and this education sort of absolves the oppressor from any obligation to change or to learn about groups that they've been oppressing. I also touch on how so much of the discussion around queer people in the church revolves around theological discussion and reflection and justification. And my argument is that we've done this. There's so much writing out there about this. We need to move on to actually talk about how queer people can flourish, and how theology, talking about theology in a more contextual and practical way of how it relates to queer lives, rather than is it okay to be gay? And so instead, I talk about being no longer playing along with being made to discuss or agree with those who disagree with us, even though the disagreement is actually opposition to who we are as humans, and instead just getting on with being, not trying to make ourselves decent in the eyes of the church, but instead saying that you can't ignore us and that we're just going to get on with things. And I think this can apply to a lot of other justice issues that are discussed in the book as well. So that's my chapter, and I'll hand back to Victoria.